In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody, and a Happy New Year to all of you. This is episode 46 of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Andrew and Jerry run for Speaker of the House. I am Speaker Andrew Langer.
I am Bizarro Speaker Jerry Rogers.
We were doing that thing going. Well, you got the beard for being a Bizarro Speaker of the House.
Yes,
you need to shave it down like it's a little like spot.
I am going to say that we should have regular order and single issue pieces of legislation, and members should legislate, and there should be witnesses, and there ought to be more amendments from the floor. You know, Andrew, to be serious, I think it's so ironic, especially, as the left. Oh, by the way, happy JC Day.
Yes.
This is the new anti-conservative, anti-GOP annual holiday.
Hold on. I want to get to that. Now let's.
Yeah, I know, but it's connected to the speaker's race in that.
That's true.
I am just off of what is the common wisdom or common understanding of what's happening. I don't think any of this is a bad thing. I don't think it's bad that we're going to have 11, 12, 13 rounds of votes. This is democracy. And those who say, no, this is not democracy, this is chaos, they're wrong. Democracy can be ugly and can be disorganized at times. And you can't say we want democracy and then we have democracy and you say, well, this is just chaos and the Republicans are eating their own. I just find that criticism. Well, someone tweeted today. Let me just say this. Someone tweeted today, a friend of ours, a colleague of ours, a former colleague of yours, a colleague of mine, tweeted out today that MAGA Republicans are doing today on the floor of the House what they did 2 years ago on January 6th. And I think that is so lazy in terms of making that analogy.
Naive and uninformed. I mean, listen, let me start here, which is I am never swayed by arguments that start with this makes the United States look bad abroad. Because I don't care. I don't care what other nations particularly think about the image of the United States.
You know what? And we see assemblies and parliaments overseas, and they beat each other with shoes, for crying out loud. I mean, right? I mean, this is
just made me do a spit take.
But I'm right. They beat each other they take their shoes off.
Yes.
But the thing is that this is a normal
right. Let's think about the chaos that has gone on in Great Britain over the last several years in terms of their parliament and in terms of their parliamentary leadership. And let's remember that we only go through this but once every 2 years in terms of congressional elections and elections for the Speaker of the House. So
right. And someone would say someone would criticize us and say, well, it hasn't happened since 1923 and it hasn't happened since 1850 whatever. But here's the thing. What's happening right now in plain view happens all the time, but behind closed doors. Right. Remember, in 2014, Kevin McCarthy was supposed to be Speaker of the House, but he couldn't get the vote. So what happened? They went behind closed doors and had meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and they came out with Speaker Paul Ryan. But again, the difference now is we know who the 40 rebels are.
Right.
And in the past, we didn't know what was going on.
I am someone who believes that these things ought to be pre-negotiated, right? I do believe that. But I do believe that the fact that, and this is what I've been saying since the election, and I've been dubious that McCarthy was going to be able to get the votes for speakership since the midterm elections for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is we massively underperformed. Well below expectations. We didn't massively underperform. We performed well under expectations or what was promised. But the fact that McCarthy could not get enough votes to become speaker in the 2 months between the midterm elections and today, that demonstrates to me that we have to be having this discussion. and that there is legitimate concern for McCarthy in terms of being speaker and moving forward. Here's the reality, right? I want out of a speaker is someone who's going to bring some gravitas to the job, and someone who can use that gravitas to explain what Republicans are doing with this session of Congress to the American people, who can make the case in an articulate fashion. I also want someone who is scandal-free, relatively scandal-free, but most importantly, someone who can articulate, who can tell the story of what's going on, because we already know that the press is going to be stilted in terms of how they cover this Congress. We're seeing this with how the press is covering, the speaker's race. I do want to get things underway and move forward because there is so much stuff going on. But here's the reality, right, Jerry? That 3 days, 4 days, even 5 days doesn't matter in terms of the longevity of this congressional race. Nobody come fall of 2024 is going to remember or vote based upon the fact that there was chaos in the speaker's race at the beginning of the congressional session.
Look, our friend Steve Hayward said that this is the next best thing to a government shutdown. If Congress is not convened, Congress can't get into mischief. The Senate can't do anything because the House hasn't reconvened. Here's the issue too, and that is everyone who's commenting on this is just full of nonsense.
Right.
You have the Bill Kristols and the Never Trumpers, the anti-MAGAs, all saying that, this shows that the MAGA movement is extreme. Two things are wrong with that. Number one, it's not an anti-MAGA movement or pro-MAGA movement. This is not ideological. There are MAGA folks for McCarthy. There are MAGA folks against McCarthy. It's not a MAGA thing, number one, but it shows you how fixated certain people are in the uniparty, that they have to bring up MAGA for everything, number one. Number two, it also shows their hypocrisy in that they also say that Kevin McCarthy shouldn't be speaker.
Right.
They say that McCarthy sold his soul to Donald Trump and he should never be speaker. Well, then why are you criticizing the attempt to have someone else be speaker? Because they don't care. These the David French, the Bill Kristol, and the list, the George Conway, and all the rest of them. Folks, our friends at National Review and other places, they just don't care.
Well, I will say this is more of the. I will say at least Dan McLaughlin at National Review has been very even-handed with all of this. He has written about.
But Dan was wrong. He also came out and justified impeachment, which I can't get over.
Jerry, time out for a second. Setting aside, National Review's record on Trump, we know that National Review was they were anti-Trump throughout it. But they had their moments where they could be generous and they could be praiseful when things went right. But we know as a rule, well, I'm just talking about Dan McLaughlin specifically in terms of what's going on with the speaker's race and being very sort of even-handed in going down this road and saying, everybody is being ridiculous in terms of their, whether it's panic, right? The people who are saying that this is a national security threat because the speaker is, depending on how you look at it, second or third in line, behind the president. And we don't have a speaker. God forbid something happens this weekend, and Kamala Harris is out.
Then it just goes to the third in line, for crying out loud.
Well, yes, but the point is, I am damn sure that if something were to happen, the House could get its act together and get somebody nominated. Jerry, you and I all both know what would happen. No, actually we don't. I was going to say Matt Gaetz has already nominated Donald Trump to be speaker. We know that there were some folks who would push that so Donald Trump could become president again. By the way, one of the best takes I've seen over the weekend or today on social media is the person who tweeted out that Matt Gaetz should sell speaker nominations over cow. You give him $50, I'll nominate you for speaker. Which I thought was funny.
Oh my goodness, I saw that. Yeah. The cameo. In fact, I would. If Matt Gaetz had a sense of humor, he would do that.
Yes, he would, and you and I both would pay the $50. at some point in time. But we think this is so. By the way, as we're taping this, the House is getting ready to convene once again. Jerry seems to think that a deal has been struck. I've said that the odds have been in this week that it's in all likelihood McCarthy is going to be speaker if the deal gets cut. But I also think that frankly it's equally as likely that it's going to be Steve Scalise as a compromise position. At some point earlier this week, I was kind of hoping that somebody was going to nominate Newt Gingrich, but then Newt Gingrich went and castigated the holdouts, so that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a lot of speculation on Twitter because you saw AOC
kibitzing with Paul Gosar.
Exactly right, yeah. and someone at the Washington Post, I think, did an opinion piece talking about how a coalition of Dems and R's should bring in like a Fred Upton, someone who is a moderate. Here's my thing, and I find again very interesting. So Kevin McCarthy yesterday, being pressured by the media, was answering questions, and he kept on saying that his concessions to this group of 40 is not going to undermine the power that he would wield as speaker. But the bottom line is, I want the speaker to have less power.
Right.
See, this is the problem when people say, well, we don't need a strong speaker. The problem in the Congress is that the speaker, with a couple of, in the past, her aides, Nancy Pelosi's aides, they've come up with these big omnibus packages, the Inflation Reduction Act, the COVID relief monies being sent out. There was never any legislative oversight or investigation or testimony. There was no regular order. And so I think going back to the old system, or a system, again, the speaker has always been a powerful position, but going back where, one person can vacate the speaker. Even that, it drives me nuts when people say, well, how can you have a government if one member of Congress can order vacate the speaker, right? But you still have to vote.
Well, yes, and
I mean, you still have to vote. So almost everyone commenting on this knows nothing about how the Congress works.
Talk about this from a constitutional structure, right? And the very nature of our republic is based upon this idea that small groups of political minorities can hold up and offer a counterbalance to the decision making of powerful political majorities, right? That's the whole essence of who we are as a people. That's why we have a filibuster in the Senate, right? So that you get, and that's why we have super majorities to vote on certain issues in the Senate. And again, why the legislative branch offers a check on the power of the executive branch, why we have a court system, right? This is the whole essence of who we are. And the idea is we diffuse power so that individual rights are not abused. Right? That's the whole essence of all of this. And so when you have an all-powerful Speaker of the United States, Speaker of the House, that speaker can go off and do things that can be very harmful to the republic overall.
Yes, and again, that's why this idea of chaos, as a criticism, I disagree with. I want a little chaos. I want roadblocks. I want things to slow down. I want investigations and oversight and committee hearings, and I want legislation with one topic. I don't want what we've had.
Honey, I almost called you honey there, Jerry. Thank you.
I love you.
I love you too. So gets into a conversation we had earlier about rumors swirling around about grifters. Anyway, but this gets into, Jerry, the whole reason why you want to get this returned to regular order. Again, you think about the structure of Congress and the deliberative nature of government, right? When you have an all-powerful speaker, it removes the need for careful deliberation via the regular order process. The wonderful thing about regular order, the wonderful thing about the traditional process by which ideas become legislation, is that it goes through this very careful vetting process. right? Whether it's a bill to, and I'm going to use the example from I'm Just a Bill in Schoolhouse Rock, whether it would be a bill that would regulate school buses stopping at railroad tracks. By the way, an unconstitutional bill, but let's set that aside. To the appropriations process and the budgetary process and what goes into a budget, all of these things, if they follow regular order, and at any point in the process, they can be hijacked, and I mean that in the best way, or put a stop to by small groups of political minorities who are voicing themselves. So again, the idea that we are lessening the power of the speaker has grown considerably over time. It should not be as powerful as it is today. Right, and so we need to have this discussion and have a caucus to do this. Anyway, go ahead, Jerry.
Well, again, a couple of things, right? Today, and I joked about this, but Joe Biden is going to talk about January 6th and the attack on democracy. Let me ask you this: we just had the omnibus, and that thing was passed 6,000 pages. I know it was been reported as 4,100 pages. It's not 4,100 pages. It was 6,000 pages because of the end notes and other material that went along with the legislation. So right at the holidays, we dropped this omnibus to spend $1.7 trillion. No one's read it. Still, no one's read it. It was put together behind closed doors by oligarchs, by Nancy Pelosi and some powerful members of Congress. And it was signed in St. Croix, not even in the Oval Office. Tell me that's not a threat to democracy. But then, of course it is. But then you have this speaker's fight, and when I say everyone, Andrew, it's everyone. It's the New York Times. It's National Review. It is the Spectator. It is Slate and Salon. You name the venue. Everyone is saying that this is chaos. This is an embarrassment. The Republicans are eating their own. I mean, I could just read down the headlines.
Of course.
But again, what's a greater threat to democracy? Dropping omnibus bills or having it out in public who should be the Speaker of the House? It just drives me nuts.
Well, I mean, either way, here's the thing. To me, the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? I mean, they are certainly, they can be taken hand in hand. The idea that we have an omnibus bill and we have an all too powerful speaker, those go hand in hand. I think you can have the debate and discussion, and you can have the debate and discussion beforehand. I think that, but here's the other problem, Jerry, is that there is no adult, no honest broker within the movement who can sit down and say to people, right? Because we went through this, we've also gone through this with the RNC chairmanship race, and some of the other issues that happened around election time, in which, right, what was the issue, Jerry? Shoot, there was some chaos that was happening way back. Oh, something, there was anyway, a number of the election challenges after the elections this fall, and there was no honest broker, no one in a position of responsibility who could go and talk to the parties who were out there. In this instance, there's nobody who can sit down. There's nobody who said to Kevin McCarthy in the weeks leading up to the election, Kevin, you don't have the votes going into this. You've had 2 months to get them. Don't you think that maybe this means that maybe you won't have the wherewithal to organize the caucus once you become speaker? That's a discussion that probably someone should have had with Kevin McCarthy.
You raise a great point here. So if McCarthy knew he didn't have the votes, and from what I hear, everyone is surprised at the number 20, the 20. Yes. I said 40 early in the program. I meant 20. The 20 or so who are hardcore here. We knew there were 6 or 7 or 8, maybe, that sort of thing. But the bottom line is what kind of patriot is Kevin McCarthy? I mean, if we're going to put blame here, why blame the 20? Right. If McCarthy doesn't have the votes in a very narrow majority, then why didn't he spend the last month finding a consensus candidate to lead the House?
Right. Or more to the point, I mean, and I get it, right? At some point in time,
he doesn't deserve this. He's behaving as if it's the next in line syndrome.
Everybody, see, here's the thing. I do blame everybody here.
I blame everyone. I agree with you.
Yes. because on the one hand, it's like, what do the 20 really want in the end, and what concessions are not being made? You know, where is their compromise in all of this? On the other hand, he didn't get the votes. He didn't do it. They don't want him. So if they don't want him and he doesn't have the votes, then he has to concede at some point in time here. As I said,
the thing is, and for those who care about the public perception and how this thing plays out in the media, well, then McCarthy should have worked this out beforehand. You know, again, go back to the Nixon example, 1960 presidential election. He could have protested. He could have moved forward in a different way, but he knew that the presidency was bigger than himself, and he decided to concede. McCarthy never did that.
No.
In a sense, McCarthy is very similar in terms of narcissism as Donald Trump.
I agree with you. And I'm sorry if I'm a little distracted, Jerry. I've got a dog who has been very needy the last couple of days, and
a duck,
and he is refusing to leave my lap right now. Wait, here, maybe he's going. Hold on, Charlie, go down. There we go. Thank you. All right, there we go. You are.
Maybe you should close the door to your studio.
Well, maybe that would. Listen, I appreciate that, Jerry. You know, if my studio in fact had a door, I would close the door to my studio.
So, there you go.
Yes, thank you. So all right. So, but you think a deal has been cut?
Well, I think that yes. I mean, everything I'm seeing is that Congressman Chip Roy, has made a deal with McCarthy, but it might not matter. All right, so a deal could mean that 15, 14 of the 20 now vote for McCarthy, but there are still 5 or 6 hardcore never.
If he can just get them to vote present. The issue is to get several of them to vote present,
right?
And then that's fine. And I think ultimately that's what's going to have to happen if McCarthy is going to become speaker. Otherwise, then it is this thing. And I'm going to say it again.
At the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference who the speaker is, because in terms of ideology, in terms of political persuasion, Scalise not much different than Jordan, not much different than McCarthy not much different than you name the member. I mean, frankly, what should matter this next session, right? What can Congress do? The new Congress do? The new House of Representatives do? Yeah, Jerry, it's oversight. The committee chairmen matter more than who the speaker is.
And this is except for this.
All right.
That I want a speaker. This is why I go back to Newt. And we can say what we will about Newt's personal life. But Newt was a great speaker, and he was a great speaker, and he remains a figure because he's able to articulate what it is that we're doing. And that is so, listen, maybe it's not important to anybody else, but I think it is vitally important to me. And I think it's vitally important. I think it is vitally important generally, is that you need a good storyteller who is able to articulate what it is that they are able to do, what it is they are trying to do, and what it is they are doing and have achieved.
Well, unfortunately, right now, look, I like Kevin McCarthy. I like Congressman Scalise. I like Jim Jordan. I like these guys. But there is not a Newt Gingrich among the Republicans right now.
I agree with you there.
Gingrich had a very special talent to make complex policy ideas, to make them conversational and make them digestible. Yes. There is no one. We talk about this all the time, how our side is constantly explaining. Their side can have the bromides, the easy, what?
This is why I wanted them to just bring back Newt. If they just bring back Newt, this solves all the problems.
But I love Gingrich, but he's what is he, 80?
Something that's okay. All he's doing is telling stories. No, it's fine. He's done the job before.
He could be Pope Emeritus.
He would be no more addled than Nancy Pelosi is speaking.
Oh my goodness, you're right.
So, that's the bar that we're working off of. I think out of the three we talked about, out of Jordan and McCarthy and Scalise, I think Scalise has the best. Plus, again, and I've said this, and it sounds like it's tongue in cheek, I think if you've taken a bullet for your caucus in a literal sense, then you have the upper hand, and you should be in leadership in that way. Jerry, you brought up the issue of J6 and the almost macabre need on the part of the Democrats. Something, it's not macabre, it's craven, right? It is I want to say it's like it's zombie-like, but it's craven in what they're doing. It is a way of just trying to just use tragedy in the worst kind. Right? To me, it's like this. It's like, I come back to, let's assume for a moment that it was an insurrection, right? Which it isn't. It wasn't. It was not an insurrection. It did not have any of the hallmarks of an insurrection.
No, of course not.
It would have been like the Republicans in 1860 and beyond, let's say even after the Civil War, forcing an annual commemoration of the firing on Fort Sumter at Charleston Harbor, right? Which is when the Civil War really began. Or, anyway, pick any other date to commemorate the beginning of the Civil War, whatever the first battle was. And I say this because, right, the Civil War was an insurrection.
Yeah,
it was a civil war. People, anyway, and they were seeking, in the end, right, the end result would have either have been the South living alone or the South defeating the North, in fact, which is what they tried to do, what they wanted to do. And yet we come back from legitimate insurrection, and what does Abraham Lincoln say? We treat our brothers with malice toward none and charity towards all.
Yeah,
and we don't. We don't commemorate. We don't commemorate the day that Fort Sumter was fired upon.
No, we don't. And again, you're showing the. I like what you said, the cravenness, the hypocrisy, because they don't care. Just like those who are criticizing the speaker's vote, they don't care what these folks care about power.
Something,
and,
I will say
and
this,
advancing themselves.
Just going back to this, I will say that out of all of this, I don't particularly. I mean, where do you stand on Matt Gaetz? I don't think Matt Gaetz is particularly interested in advancing anybody other than Matt Gaetz.
No, I think Matt Gaetz is a kook.
Okay, there you go. I mean, I just want to make.
But I don't care. He's one guy. I mean,
yes,
but he's a kook. He's a kooky. He's a kook.
Again,
I think Lauren Boebert is a kook. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is a kook. They're kooks. But you know what? Everyone needs their kooks in the party.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has fallen. This is why you're right that it's not a MAGA thing, because Marjorie Taylor Greene has fallen in behind McCarthy.
Right.
The point, and McCarthy was a staunch supporter of Trump who endorsed McCarthy. My point, the reason why I'm chuckling is once again, with art imitating life and life imitating art, Matt Gaetz reminds me of Congressman Jonah Ryan from Veep. I mean, apart from the fact that he had to shave his head at one point, but again, sort of the loudmouth, obnoxious congressman. And I don't know what it is that's in the water down in that first congressional district of Florida, because before Matt Gaetz, I don't know if there was somebody in between, but Joe Scarborough represented that district at one point. And you see where all of this has gone.
Let me throw something at you that's right up your alley, and I haven't heard you mention this yet. But if you think about it, we're talking about J6 now, right? We're talking about the Capitol riot. The expanding power of federal government agencies turned the presidential election into a all or nothing game where the executive branch has power now, unprecedented really in American history, because of the expanding regulatory state.
Right.
And if you think about it, one reason why Donald Trump wanted to keep the presidency, and why Biden wants to make sure everyone thinks it's an insurrection, at the end of the day, it all has to do with the fact that we have what was called once we have an imperial presidency,
right?
And that ultimately is the problem. January 6th should be a day where we think about how to unpack the unconstitutional powers that the executive branch has collected through the decades.
Well, it's funny. And again, I chuckled now because you remind me of the story of Fred Smith, our old friend Fred Smith, boss at Competitive Enterprise Institute. CEI was at the corner of 17th and K downtown. Yep. And every once in a while, there would be a presidential motorcade that would pass by, and Fred would angrily shake his fist and yell, "This is not an imperial presidency." So I'm reminded of that fact. But that's exactly it. I mean, they want to perpetuate this. I always go back to, you can always tell when a movie was made based upon who the enemies in the story are, like some kind of movie about heroism. So if you go back, and in the early 1990s, the enemies are all the former Russian republics, and in the 80s they're all Arab terrorists, and of course in the 40s and 50s they're all Nazis. And then in the early 2000s, again, we're back to Arab terrorists. So
although now the enemy seems to be
this is my point,
the wealthy today.
Well, I was going to say the wealthy, but it's also the conservatives and insurrectionists and
MAGA-ites. Have you seen the show Succession yet?
I've watched the first half of the first season. I need to get back into it.
It's very interesting. We watched The Menu last night.
Oh, how was that? Because we've been meaning to watch this.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah, I pulled up, Jerry, a movie. You may not have heard of it. We're on vacation, pulled up HBO Max on my computer to watch a movie. And this was an obscure film from the early 1980s. It's kind of a fish out of water story.
What is it?
It's called pardon my French. Crocodile Dundee.
Oh my God, that's a great. Oh, that's not a knife. I love that.
That's a knife.
I love that.
Yes. So, but you're right though about the rich. I mean, because that's why Billions on Showtime was such an interesting story, because it went both ways in terms of they tried to make out Bobby Axelrod, who was the billionaire, to be the villain, but they also made it really clear that Chuck Rhodes, as the agent of the state, was also the villain, ruthless and willing to overstep the bounds of the law in order to get his way. Anyway, my point in all of this is, the left, frankly, was successful in blunting the midterm elections for Republicans by continuing to bring up Donald Trump as an issue and January 6th as an issue.
And right? Donald Trump helped them.
Yes. Well, yes, that's very true. And so they know that the more they can continue to spin up Donald Trump, and the more that they continue to keep this as an insurrectionist issue. And you're right. And this is what makes it so, we can only, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to dance around this. The left demands total and complete submission. And unless and until you bow down and become the David Frenches of the world, or the Jennifer Rubins.
By the way, just picked up by the New York Times.
Yeah, David, that's right. You mouth the words, and you as though once, unless and until you bow down and you engage in the incantation that they want you to, then you cannot exist in polite society. And so that's what this is all about. It is about forcing folks to engage in the incantation. And that's also not good for the Republic.
Right. Henry Olsen, who is a columnist for the Washington Post, but also he's someone I worked with at the Manhattan Institute. For years, he was at the American Enterprise Institute. He did a piece 2 weeks ago, or a week ago maybe, where he said that everyone misses it, what the true lesson is, or the takeaway from January 6th. And you kind of hit on part of it, where we don't celebrate or commemorate the attack on Fort Sumter. We don't celebrate the day when the Confederacy when they drew arms and a true insurrection. We don't celebrate that. In the same way, Henry Olsen was saying that the true lesson of January 6th is that everything worked like it was supposed to.
Now, I've said this in the past. It's absolutely right. Right. The lesson is that the Republic endures.
Yeah.
That the beauty of our system is that you can heap tremendous amounts you or try to heap tremendous amounts of damage on it, and yet it endures because we have these things. What we can't do is fundamentally change our system because these things happened, right? It's funny. I saw Leopoldstadt this week, which is a
God bless you.
Thank you. Which is a brilliant play by Tom Stoppard. And it focuses on Nazis, and there's a heavy-handed lesson about anti-Semitism and how anti-Semitism endures. And I know that there are folks out there, right? And listen, it gets down to the discussion that we were having last week, tying this all together. Not you and me. I was having the discussion on the air. Ben Cardin goes on in front of Congress last week, and he says that hate speech needs to be silenced. Right. And we need to do more with the internet to silence hate speech.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you continue, I'm going to draw all of these things together, and folks are going to say I'm making a comparison between Nazis and insurrectionists. I'm not, or that I'm trying to tie them together. I'm not. When you continue to hammer on people and you other people who are engaging in legitimate political dissent, and you try to demand submission for that dissent, that does not bring them into the fold. That makes them angrier. That further drives us apart. When you try to outlaw hate speech and drive it underground, and you don't subject it to full and vigorous debate and expose it to the light of examination, that all that does is makes it fester and grow like mold or fungus in the dark. And also
anyway, the danger of Ben Cardin's comments is what's hate speech. So if I protest outside an abortion clinic, on public property, not trespassing, but is that hate speech? If I go down to the Capitol and I protest the IRS and the tax rates, is that hate speech?
If I go down and stand with a sign in front of the Capitol and say January 6th was not an insurrection,
right? Is that hate speech?
Is that hate speech? Well, it gets into it's funny because let's pull it back a little bit, get back into your bailiwick here. There is this debate happening in California right now over the bill regarding doctors and misinformation.
It's insane.
And if a doctor says something that is at the leading edge of science,
right,
that goes against
it's interesting. 2023, if you look forward, it's going to be the year. Someone else said this, so I'm stealing it, but it's going to be the year of unintended consequences in terms
100%.
In terms of legislation passed in the states, especially in California. California passed this bill that prohibits physicians from giving false information about COVID. And the thing is, what we thought was wrong information, or what the public health community said was misinformation back in 2020, we're learning today that in fact it was correct information. And so it's so dangerous. The left is constantly telling us that the doctor shouldn't be in the bedroom or in the privacy. Decisions should be made between a patient and a doctor, but yet they do this. A clear violation of the First Amendment also.
But there's that aspect of it, but it also violates the principles of scientific inquiry.
Of course. Let's say right. So you can't ask. You know what? Just again to make this relevant to what's happening today, Damar Hamlin. This NFL football player, he stumbled and collapsed, cardiac arrest on Monday Night Football. We all saw it play out. And while it was happening, there were some who were saying, "Hey, this is unusual for so many young athletes, so many young men to be collapsing, having cardiac issues." And then in quick time, the response was, "How dare you?
Right.
You cannot ask these questions." And this is my take on this, and that is, we don't know yet Damar Hamlin's medical history, why this happened. Look, I'm a football coach. It could very well be that this guy's face mask hit his chest in such the wrong place that it caused cardiac arrest.
100%.
He could have an undiagnosed heart issue, or it could be the booster shots. My point is that there's nothing wrong with asking the questions.
And let me take it into a slightly different direction, even if because that's the general public. Who was the guy who the doctor who was brought on board by Larry Hogan and everybody criticized the situation?
Oh, Dr. Redfield.
Dr. Redfield.
Yeah.
Explain that situation one more time.
Well, long story short, he was the head of NIH,
something like that, senior person at NIH
or CDC. I forget now, but
either one doesn't matter.
He was a head of a major public health agency, and he raised the question that we should examine whether or not the virus, COVID virus, came from a lab.
Yes, the lab leak theory. Perfect.
Right.
Perfect. So,
but he wasn't even saying that it was a lab leak. He was saying we should investigate and examine it.
This is my point. Take this into consideration with the California law. Now, Dr. Robert Redfield is an internationally recognized expert. He is at the pinnacle of his
and non-political, by the way,
and non-political.
Yeah.
So the point is, he's someone who knows better than the mass public. So whoever is in charge of enforcing this California law, let's say you have a researcher at the University of California at Berkeley or at Stanford or UCLA, some major research institution, someone who is at the internationally recognized, and they happen to say something that goes against whatever this regulatory board determines is the prevailing science of the time. That board is going to go and they're going to sanction, they're going to silence, they're going to hold legally liable the expert who's raising legitimate questions. This is the danger here, and it stifles scientific inquiry.
Right, and again, it's not just public health. Robert Redfield, by the way, he was director of the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Anyway, I mean, I look, it sticks in my mind when Chuck Todd announced on Meet the Press that he would no longer have those who questioned the origin of climate change on his program.
Right.
The science was settled. Now, here's the thing. The science is never settled.
Exactly.
Right? We're still learning about DNA. We're still learning about the genome. We're still learning about Alzheimer's and cancer. Science is not settled. But here's the thing about what Chuck Todd said at Meet the Press. When he announced this, he had experts with him, but not one was a scientist.
Right.
They were all political commentators.
Yes.
And so even his announcement wasn't based on science. It was based on politics and power. And again, the same thing with COVID. I said this the other day on my radio show. I said, we have to de-link politics from public health because look, today at Real Clear Health, we just covered that there might be an uptick in measles.
Yes.
And the reason for this is because the public health community has so politicized vaccines that families are now concerned with not just the boosters for COVID for their kids. They're concerned with all vaccines now. And that is a dangerous place to be. And again, who's at fault? Everyone who politicized who politicized COVID. The governor of California is at fault here. Yeah. And it could, in the bottom line, it's going to cost people their lives. If we don't have vaccines, if people don't think that, if folks aren't getting vaccines for things like measles, we are in very serious trouble. 100%. And that is this is on the Joe Bidens, it's on the Gavin Newsoms, it's on the political left who politicized COVID vaccines. We still can't look. There's still science coming out that says that the booster might be causing the variants.
Right. Yes.
And also the booster shot for COVID, where yes, it looks like for the first 2 months after a booster, you are less at risk for serious COVID infection. But after the 2 months, you are more susceptible to serious COVID infection. So therefore, the boosters might be doing more harm than good. In California, you couldn't even say that.
All of these things are the stories that broke while you and I were on hiatus at the end of the year, which is kind of funny. By the way, Jerry and I were not supposed to record a show today. It was one of these things where I happened to come back early from vacation, so Jerry and I were able to do this.
And today, of course, is it's the Epiphany, the feast of the.
It is the feast of the Epiphany.
Little Christmas, my grandma used to call it. called.
What was that? What would you call it?
My grandma used to call it Little Christmas.
Little Christmas. I like that.
Yeah, this was the day traditionally we would leave our tree up in our Christmas decorations until January 6th. Although this year, January 2nd, we took everything down.
You took everything down. So Jerry, I don't know if you still want to talk about it, but Jerry was on a roll yesterday, angry, and 2 days ago on the air, angry about what's going on in Baltimore. You still want to talk about that, or you want to move on from that
again?
already?
But this is indicative of what's happening in cities all across the country. So whether you're listening to us in California or Pennsylvania or New York, where there are major cities and progressive mayors and progressive prosecutors, what happened in Baltimore this week is a tragedy that's not getting the national news it deserves. So 12:30 in the afternoon, lunchtime on a school day, there are 5 young men, 16 years old, 15 years old, at a Popeyes chicken hanging out in front of the Popeyes, and they are shot, a hail of bullets, and one. To date, what we know right now, at least one of these young men has died.
Yeah,
but the mayor comes on, gives a press conference right in front of where it happened, and he rails against everyone except the shooter. Yeah. He rails against the Popeyes for serving minors. He rails against the straw purchasers and the gun manufacturers, and he rails against everyone. Never once in his press conference mentioned, we're going to go get the shooter. Never mentioned the shooter. Mentioned everything else but the shooter. But here's the problem. The problem is how do you not serve 5 young men Popeye's chicken in the middle of the day?
Yeah.
Number one.
Right.
Number two, if they're not supposed to be there, if they're supposed to be on campus, which, by the way, the high school is right across the street, well, then who at the school is held accountable when these children leave campus? Yeah. I was a school teacher. I had a sign, and a football coach and a track coach. I had to sign a contract that made me liable if my children went missing. So who's held liable in the Baltimore City school system? Also, there was a police cruiser. Literally moments before the shots, a police cruiser was there and rolled out. The cop car rolled out. The murderer rolled in and shot up these kids. Well, why didn't the police officer tell these children to disperse? Or if they're not supposed to be there, get back to school. It's right there. I mean, again, is that because of reimagining policing and defund the police movement that the police are afraid to engage African-American males? Are there orders for police officers not to disperse those who are just hanging out in the street corner? But again, not one major media outlet in the city of Baltimore have asked these questions.
Yes.
Why were the kids there? Is it illegal for them to be there? If it's illegal for them to be there, why did the police officer tell them to move? Who's held responsible at the school? And on and on. And also, this whole kind of culture of violence in Baltimore City and in New York City and Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, the left has misdiagnosed the disease. And what they're doing is therefore mistreating the disease.
100%.
And that's the problem.
When you can't agree on the problem, you can't agree on the solution, and you wonder why things don't get
solved.
But
Mayor
and there
Brandon
are things
Scott,
we can't talk about, right, Jerry?
Yeah.
Because we're not allowed to talk about the epidemic of fatherless, young men in America and how that, runs through all of these.
We're
things.
not allowed to talk about the culture of violence and crime among African American men.
Yeah.
Even Brandon Scott said this in his press conference. He said, and again, just the narcissism and the wokeness of a Brandon Scott. He was upset about the shooting because he said it gives fodder. He didn't say fodder, but I'm paraphrasing the mayor.
I get it.
He said that it gives fodder to the racists who want to say that black men are killing black men. Well, guess what? In the city of Baltimore, black men are killing black men. Yeah. And we can't. And again, you talk about it, and Mayor Brandon Scott thinks you're a racist. The insanity. If I were the parents, and that's another thing too, is, we had this mass shooting recently where both the mother and the father were arrested and charged. Well, I mean, if there are 16-year-old, 15-year-old shooters,
yes,
where is the parent? Why isn't the parent held accountable? Did the parent know about the illegal
Why
gun?
isn't the parent asking the question of one of the kids who was the victim? why was my kid allowed off campus?
Right.
Why was my kid not in school? And going to the mayor and saying that.
Imagine if you, looking like you look, right, a young white guy, you were in a Popeyes restaurant, and 5 young black guys come in and order lunch, and you say, "Sorry, not going to serve you." What do you think is going to happen?
Of course.
And although and this is what Mayor Scott wanted. And again, I asked others who would know better than me, is there an ordinance in the city of Baltimore that prohibits minors from purchasing food at food stores during the day? Of course, there's no such ordinance. But the bottom line is, how could there be? Sure. Like, what if I drive into Baltimore to go to a ball game or go to the aquarium, and I have my 16-year-old with me, and she gets out to buy a hamburger? Is she not going to be able to purchase the hamburger?
Well, that's just it, right? And even if they wanted to, like, let's assume for a moment, and it's Baltimore, it's Maryland, so all kinds of crazy laws are on the books. Let's assume for a moment that somebody wanted to push for this kind of law. You are now going to make the fast food owners responsible for truancy regulation in Baltimore.
And that's what Brandon Scott literally blamed the owner of the Popeyes,
which is just crazy. Let's shift gears because we got a couple of moments left. Do you have a good Christmas, Jerry?
I always have a good Christmas. It's Jesus's birthday.
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, I'm going to comment on that real quick.
Please.
It's a load of crock.
A load of crock?
That Christmas is just simply a baptized Roman holiday, a pagan. It's not. It's not. Christmas is exactly 9 months from March 25th, which, of course, in the Catholic Church is the celebration of the Annunciation. So for the Catholic Christian, but also in Christendom, we celebrate the angel coming to Mary on March 25th. Yeah. 9 months from that. 9 months from
time out. But they couldn't have worked it out the other way and said, okay, Christmas is December, so we're going to work back to the holiday in March.
And also there's people who say, well, in Israel, there's no way shepherds would have been outdoors in December. That's not true. There's lots of historical evidence of shepherds, especially for the temple, for sacrifice at the temple, to be outdoors in September. My point is that this is not a baptized pagan date. For many in the church, this tradition of December 25th. Now, was Jesus born on December 25th? Who knows?
Yeah,
but is it likely that he was born sometime in December? Absolutely.
That's the thing.
But there's so many people who dismiss Christmas,
right?
Like critics of Christianity who say it's this baptism.
Well, right, Jerry. I mean, this gets into Bill Maher's religiosity thing, where he says that
but
Jesus
they're wrong. They're wrong on the history,
based upon the Egyptian legend, and
it's nonsense. And my point is, it's absolute nonsense.
But Christmas trees are rooted. The concept of the Christmas tree is rooted in the Roman celebration of the Saturnalia.
There's also the idea in the early Christian church that the Christmas tree, because it's evergreen, the Christmas tree represents the everlasting life.
Sure. Again, I wasn't around 2,000 years ago, so I can't say what came first and what came second.
Right. But I don't like the critics who say, well, it's just this or it's just that.
Jerry, like you always say to me about the stuff I see on social media, this is all it's all kookery. I mean, it really is.
It is kookery. You're
right. Bunch of cuckoo Charlies. I want to say one thing.
But yes, how was your Christmas, by the way?
Actually, before I get to my Christmas, because you talk about the liberals in cities, and I love the fact, by the way, that Mayor Eric Adams in New York thinks that it's unfair that other Democrat mayors or other Democrat states are sending him illegal immigrants. I find that funny. So New York, as of January 1, is allowing for recreational marijuana. Now, New York already has a problem with people, blazing up wherever they want to long before this. I want to say this, because I'm sure we have people who toke from time and again who listen to the show or watch the show. If you are doing this, could you please kindly move away from the entrance to a building, somewhere where you might otherwise smoke a cigarette or some other tobacco product. I sat there and I watched, Jerry, as people, because we went to New York this week for a couple of days, and at our hotel, two people came out of the hotel, 9:30 in the morning, mind you. This is going to be me being old man, Greg Klein, get off my lawn, kind of harping
Greg
about
Klein.
something.
I hope Greg is doing well.
Oh, Greg is doing well. Walked, no joke, Jerry, 3 steps out of the hotel lobby. And on the carpet leading into the hotel lobby, the guy blazed up a fatty and started smoking.
Have you been to D.C.?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
You can't walk anywhere in D.C. without getting a contact high.
No. I understand this. Believe me, I understand. But all I'm saying is show a little bit of respect and move away from the lobby. What was that?
No one is going to do that.
I know they're going to do that. This is just me, Jerry. This is just me carping about this. I'm just sitting there going, you wouldn't smoke a cigarette right there. If it's someplace where you wouldn't smoke a cigarette, you don't blaze up a joint. Well, that's all I'm saying.
Look, all those no smoking signs do of course pertain to smoking a Mary Jane as well.
Yes,
like you can't smoke pot in a bar.
Jerry, or otherwise known as a marijuana cigarette.
A marijuana cigarette. I think again, going to the unintended consequences, the acceleration at which we are legalizing pot is insane. And I've always been on the decriminalization side of this, but how it's working out, I think is dangerous, irresponsible, and I'm starting to question how scientific it all is, because we're finding out that smoking pot is terrible for your health in terms of your lungs. Yes. We're also finding out now that the long-term psychological impact of marijuana, because it's in such widespread use, we're getting some very interesting and potentially dangerous results.
The marijuana strains of today and the THC products that are being developed today are entirely different from when it was just some guy growing some stuff in his backyard, or even trucking it up from Mexico or wherever.
No, I find it very interesting. That's a good point, though, that we're moving away from this idea of there's a truth. Our society is becoming more the reign of relativism. Your truth, as long as you're not hurting anyone, do what you want. And we're seeing this in our politics. And we're seeing that those, ironically, who believe in this live and let live attitude are the first ones who want to censor and stifle others. But the danger here is that we're more free in terms of living your life as you want than we've ever been. Right. But at the same time, our society, our culture, we're more depressed and we're more doped up. Right. We're more drugged up. We're more on antidepressants. And
wasn't that didn't someone write a book about that a few years back? The Prozac Nation.
Yeah, but and the bottom line is that this idea, freedom, we don't understand what freedom is any longer. Freedom isn't just the right or the opportunity to do whatever you want. Yeah. Freedom is much deeper and much more important than that. And I'm fearful in 2023 that Americans are completely misunderstanding the heritage we have in terms of freedom and liberty and property rights and the rest of it.
Is it any surprise that they misunderstand this, given the fact that they have not the tradition, but who we are as a people has been so thoroughly distorted over the last few years. The Hulu's about to launch a documentary series based upon the 1619 Project.
I know. I
saw that trailer, and I'm like, well,
I saw that. I saw that too. I saw that trailer, and
your heart sank.
You know what? My heart sank. But I was in the company of some other people, and I made it a point to say, "Oh my goodness!" Even liberal historians have said the 1619 Project is nothing but political ideology. But you're right, though. I mean, it's no wonder we don't know who we are.
Is that there's never going to be a counter to it, or if there is going to be a counter to it, it's not going to get nearly the promotion. Right. No one's going to watch it. And there's going to be a whole generation of people who are going to grow up believing that this is fact, right? You know, it started with Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, which is a garbage book. And now, this is where we are. My Christmas was great, Jerry. I mean, I did 31 hours on the air. Thank you all for tuning in. It was fantastic. And I look forward to doing it again soon. And we celebrated with family. I mean, apart from some hiccups in terms of people getting sick and, things here and there, it was good. So Jerry, before you go, you take a quick look at Twitter. Do we have or social media? Do we have a speaker yet? What's the latest?
I don't think we do yet. Well, nothing has come across, but what do you see?
Oh, I haven't even looked. I mean, I could take it. I just figured while I was talking, you could take a look at.
I told my girls that for the new year, we're going to stop. We're going to rest. We're going to delight in the moment, be present in the moment. We're going to declutter and simplify. I think part of our problem on our side of the political discourse is we're too hurried.
All right.
We're rushing, we're hurrying, and we're not present. We have to be present. We have to be in the moment. And again, I think two things, right? I think in terms of our politics, if the Congress goes back to regular order, that's going to be a great reform. We'll see more. We'll have more transparency, and we'll have better legislation. And I think on the personal, for the community, I think it's important for moms and dads to actually have dinner with their kids. I think that could be transformational.
All right, here's what we have here. McCarthy gains, and this is from Benny Johnson. This is 2 minutes old. McCarthy gains in latest speaker vote as 14 rebel Republicans flip their vote for him. Hardline still implode his speakership yet again. So McCarthy 213, Jeffries 211, and seven voting for other, nobody voting present.
Yeah, but that tells me. See, now the numbers are now in the other direction.
Yeah.
So
if you can just get 2 of those people to vote, or 3 of those,
well, he doesn't.
3 of those 7 to vote present.
There's 434 congressmen. For some reason, they're not at the full 435. I don't know why. So he actually needs 217 to win.
Okay, well, there you go. So just there are a handful that need to. Well, the handful if they're all voting. Otherwise, if some vote present, then he can win with the majority.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, Gerald. When are you on this coming week?
I am on Sunday, the Jerry Rogers Show. We're going to do a special tribute to Elvis Presley.
Yes,
it's Elvis's birthday. January 8th is the King's birthday. Woo-hoo. And then I'm on again on Monday the 9th on WBAL. So catch me on Monday. I'm going to rail against Brandon Scott.
We may I don't know what you're up to next Wednesday night, but maybe we should record it at the Real Clear headquarters next Wednesday.
Sure.
All right. Well, listen. What do you want people to do, Jerry?
Find the truth. Plant your feet. Stand firm.
Stand firm. Have a great week, everybody. God bless. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.